Hi, everybody. I'm Nina Bosky, and this is a wonderful opportunity to have a interview with one of our cast members for Maryland Behind the Icon coming up with our season 2 opener called Soul Sisters. And I have the great honor and privilege to be able to interview Troy Mangram, who is playing the wonderful American jazz pianist Hank Jones. And for the audience that doesn't know who Hank Jones was, he was very accomplished. He worked with people like singers, Ella Fitzgerald is one, but very accomplished singers, jazz clubs in LA back in the 50s and 60s. But he also was the pianist, and most people don't know this, at the JFK's wonderful Happy Birthday, Mr. President, huge gala event where Marilyn Monroe sang Happy Birthday, Mr. President. So with that said, I'd like to introduce Mr. Troy Mangram. Hi, welcome.
Hey, welcome. Thank you, Nina. It's such an honor and privilege to be here, to be a part of this series, to honor the memory of Hank Jones, who I don't have enough superlatives to describe how incredible he is. The more I read about him, the more impressed I am by not just his body of work, but the legacy he left in music and really on this earth and in our culture and in our community. So it's a great honor and a great privilege to be a part of this. Thank you.
Well, you played him well. Let me just say this. And there was several people that auditioned for this role, and hands down, we said Troy's our Hank. And you played him with such grace. And what is it about him that you say it's such an honor in his legacy? What is it about him that struck you, given the time period he lived in? Because I think he was born around 1918, 1919, something like that.
Yeah, man, what really stood out to me and was what I was impressed by is grace, right? The amount of grace he carried within himself. You had this man who, as I watched his interviews, as he was late in life, and I read about him and researched kind of the circles that he ran and the people he was influenced by and those he influenced, that he had to have tough skin and a soft heart, right? Because he never came across as bitter, never came across as angry, but he also never came across as timid. So this is a man who was sure of who he was, lived into all that he was really destined to live into, and did not allow the harshness of the world to really damper his spirit. He brought that alight in the midst of darkness through his music and through his relationships and his connections and the way he interacted with those who maybe had, not even maybe, who actually had some just really unhealthy, unsavory opinions about him based on nothing more than his physical appearance. So to be able to embody that and carry that and just walk through life with that, through all of the things that he no doubt had to endure, and still, as he's an old man late in life, is still playing music, is still giving back, is still expressing just so much grace through his talents and his conversations and the wisdom that he imparted. So I just saw that as something that I aspire to have, as hopefully in the twilight years of my life, that I'm not jaded, that I have I do have tough skin, but my heart still remains soft.
You summed it up so well, and I can imagine back in those days, because he lived through that time when segregation was huge, and it would be really easy to get bitter. And, for those of you that have not heard Soul Sisters yet, you might be hearing this before it's even out. But let's say you're hearing this after the episode is out. I would say to you, go listen to the episode, because it really speaks to that era of civil rights. It speaks to what Marilyn was standing up for, what Ella Fitzgerald was standing up for, what Hank Jones was standing up for. But, the thing is that people can get bitter. They can, and rightfully so, by the way.
Hmm.
Or I have the saying, they can get better.
Hmm.
In your own life, given the fact that even though so much has changed since the 1960s, 50s, and 60s, in some ways things haven't, because we're still talking about these issues. So they
Hmm.
haven't completely transformed. How would you say in your own life you either fight that getting bitter, and how do you overcome that? Because I think that it's really important for people to have role models and somebody to say, well, how did you do it? Because it's
Right.
easy just to plug into that anger or plug into that bitterness and stay there. So how did you deal with it in your own life, or do deal with it in your own life? And how would you, if you are not moving to that, you're moving beyond bitter, how do you do it?
It's a great question. From a very young age, I had a hard time dealing with anger. It was, short temper, and I burned really hot. So just growing up in my house with, I have seven sisters and a brother, so there's nine of us, all pretty stubborn, strong-willed people, and once we kind of get a sense of how the other is, we tend to, as kids, to kind of poke at that. And I had a very short fuse. I had a lot of learning to do in terms of emotional maturity. But my mother, she did a really good job of giving me the tools at a young age to process what I was feeling and to learn how to grieve and lament well, right? To kind of to pour my heart out and to be open with those things, but do it in a way that that vulnerability actually fortifies me rather than leaves me exposed, and learn how to do it to the right people. So I've learned not to carry those weights by myself, to go to people, to have conversations with people that I trust, to ask myself the question, what about this is making me upset? And what I realize is that oftentimes it's because I've been offended, because I feel slighted, because I feel disrespected. And so my second question is, well, what would cause a person to do that? Is it something that I've done or a belief that they hold? If it's something that I've done, it's an opportunity for me to own that and to learn and grow. If it's something that they've done, then I do create space between myself and that person, but I also extend grace. And so what that looks like is, hey, this person may not be somebody that I want to interact with, but I realize that the way they're coming to me or what they view about me is a reflection of them, what they've been taught, what they've experienced, not me. So I
Mm,
don't internalize it and I don't own that label. I recognize it for what it is, and then that gives me an opportunity, if they're willing, to engage in conversations. And I always say my best defense against what somebody believes about me is to just be me.
mm.
Right? It's to like whatever it is, to just be me, and that has helped me tremendously not to carry a lot of weights and burdensome things that I was never meant to carry. Doesn't mean that I don't get angry, right? It doesn't mean that there's not a righteous indignation, but what I strive to not react, and to not live angry, right? Anger is okay. Anger is good. It's what we do that makes the difference. It's how we respond, or what path we choose to take once that's there. Because all emotions, I think, are good if we learn how to manage them.
I think what you're saying is so important, not just in regards to civil rights, but what we're dealing with right now in this world right now. Because you said something really important. You said learning not to react. The emotion itself is okay. We're human. We have triggers. We sit there and go, where in the world did that come from? Right. But
Yeah.
the self-awareness and the ability to step inside and explore, whose is this? Is this me? Did I do something to evoke this? And if
Hmm.
not, having a little bit of understanding, and also having the wisdom to know, if I can engage in conversation, fantastic. Sometimes you can, and sometimes you just can't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You just might have to take a step back and go, okay, that's their reality. This is mine. And let's keep on moving. But
Yep.
what I hear you saying more than anything is not taking it personally.
Yeah, and then it's
Reality.
hard.
Yeah.
That is hard because a lot of times some things that people believe, uh, they attack things that are foundational to our identity. So it's who I am as a person, right? Whether it be my culture, my ethnicity, my belief system, my identity, like those things that I hold dear, that are kind of the foundation of who I am. And you, for whatever reason, have ostracized me, or you've marginalized those things, or you attack those things, and I feel like you're attacking me, right? And so that's a really hard, very nuanced dance, and it's something that I am by no means perfect at, that I'm learning, right? That I'm continuing to learn, but my posture is one of, hey, I want to grow in this, because the alternative doesn't seem too appealing to me. To be bitter, to be hard, to be angry, to be aggressive, to be violent. Because ironically, if I buy into that and I live into that, then I affirm a lot of the prejudices that people carry about me anyway. And then I become what they
Yes.
assume. And I don't want to be that.
Man, what you are saying is so powerful, Troy, because it is this interesting dance. Because you're right, you have every reason to feel those emotions. And yet, if you become that angry man or angry woman, you then become whatever the judgment is. Oh yeah, see, that's who they are,
Mm-hmm.
or he is, etc. And it's the fact that you have the awareness to be able to open up to other solutions.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is the challenge. Whether we're talking about civil rights, we're talking about being marginalized, being dismissed, being disrespected. There's many places in society that a lot of people feel that, regardless of
Right.
your ethnic background is.
Mm-hmm.
However, the awareness, it's so easy. What I hear you saying is not putting it on the outside. There's something that happens internally with you first,
Mm-hmm.
and then you process it and then decide how you want to deal with it.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
the only thing I can control on this earth is me, what I choose to do, how I choose to respond or react to what's happening. I can't control someone's belief system. I can't control someone's attitude. I can't control the brokenness that's within them. I can't control any of those things. I barely have a handle on a lot of those things within myself, but I do have a choice in how I respond and what I do and the choices that I make. So I do those things. And then if I do those things well, I can get to a point of influence, right, with those around me, to be able to and have the relational equity built up to speak into people and to offer an opinion that has credibility to someone. And now they're listening and they're open. But if I don't actually affirm their value by first being secure in mine, right? So I'm secure in my value. So what you say about me is not going to get me to react, because it doesn't change who I am, right? That's one thing my mom used to always say. Okay, so they called me this. Did that make it so? I'm like, no, but they said it. She said, but does it make it so? Like, no. She goes, I am who I am. What they say doesn't change that. And so understanding that I have value, I have worth, like I am unique, and so are you. If I recognize that about myself and I display that to someone who has a broken recognition of their own value, which is the only reason they feel another person is a threat or is less than them, then once I'm secure in my value, I can actually hear from you, identify where the fault is, hopefully speak into it, and then we can begin to mend the fences, right? I mean, and that's on a personal level, but there's a lot of things that happen politically, socially, and things like that. But if we don't do this work first, none of that work has actually any weight.
Okay. I don't know what the next level of political leader is going to be, but I'm going to say I'm voting for you for president, because that's exactly what we need in this this little, my side, your side, name calling, reactionary, all over the place. So, this applies to so much, and I really appreciate your openness to have this dialogue, because it at times is not easy. And in part of the episode, and we talked about this, and I want to go to it. Hank Jones was on the marquee back in
Hmm.
the day. And yet, back in the day, he couldn't walk through that front door.
Yeah.
I would never, I know what it's like to be a female and be
Hmm.
marginalized and dismissed, but I have no idea what it is to walk in your shoes as a Black man today. Okay.
Hmm.
How does that make you feel hearing that back then? And how does it make you feel today if and when that ever happens to you in today's, you know, 2021, 2022?
Right. Man, for one, I owe tremendous debt to the men and women who pushed, who said something, right, in that time. Like for Hank to say, I should have been able to walk through the front door. Like that's the reality, right? For people like Marilyn who advocated for those, who used their influence to open doors for others. We owe a tremendous amount of debt and a tremendous gratitude to them, because I quite frankly, that can do something to you. To have this recognition that you don't value me unless I'm producing something that you can monetize, right? So the value and the pillar that slavery was built upon is still there. We may have torn down the building, but you're just rebuilding something else on the same foundation,
Mm.
right? And we have that same issue, is that we may have torn down the building of Jim Crow. We may have torn down the building of segregation, but the foundation and the ruins are what this new thing is built upon. So we have the work of deconstructing that as well and speaking to it. So I may never come to an experience where somebody says, you cannot come in here because of who you are. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen to other people, even still today. And so for me to say, because it's not happening to me, it doesn't matter is wrong, right? It says, hey,
Very
we
powerful.
have to get to a point where we recognize that every single one of us matters, is important, and actually believe that the words, like, we have inalienable rights of life, of freedom, and the opportunity to pursue happiness and wholeness. If we don't actually live like that, when I see somebody, irrespective of their beliefs, irrespective of the choices they made, like, I have to recognize their value, and we build a society that seeks to honor one another rather than to use one another. Like, we won't move. So that's kind of where we are, is we still have a society whose foundation is not built on honoring one another.
Oh my God. I have to say, this is so, see, this is what was happening, for a lot of us, is how can we honor one another without tearing another person down, another
Right.
culture down, another, black, white, green, brown,
Yeah.
any other, belief system, Democratic, Republican,
Right.
start honoring the things that are good about each other, because we're not going to get any further if we
Hmm.
don't start looking at this as we're all in this together.
Right.
Isn't our DNA? It was like, basically it's only 2% that makes us different. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's
we're the
so,
same.
yeah, I mean, we're all the same. So the fact that, I'm a half Croatian, half German doesn't make me any different than a half Irish, half black, African American.
Yeah.
I have one of my best friends. She's half Irish, and I feel, it's a challenge sometimes, because when you don't have that upbringing, those
Hmm.
tools, it's so easy to get into that anger. And yet,
Hmm.
like you said, anger sometimes is a good place to be,
Right.
because it fuels you to move forward, but not at the effect of just anger without any positive outcome. You got to use it to fuel
Correct.
something for positive, not fuel
Yeah.
something to tear everybody down.
And
So yeah, go ahead.
I was saying the same can be said of grief and sadness, right? Because I mean, anger isn't the only response to hardship. It's not the only response to, being marginalized. Actually, it's a lot of deep sadness that goes unaddressed, especially in men, or people who feel like they have to be strong. right? We don't know how to be sad because sadness is equated to weakness when it's not, right? Learning how to be sad, to grieve well, and to process those things is just as important as processing anger and joy, right? Right? It's just as important as learning how to process all those things.
So, I think this is really important. I have a client of mine whose brother is up for murder. Okay.
Mhm,
And a lot of anger,
mhm,
lot of anger. And you know, how do we reach people that didn't have a mom like you, didn't have a family like you?
mhm.
How do we reach our people that are internalizing that anger and just acting out? Because there's a lot of us acting out right now. But
Yeah.
I want to you have a beautiful voice and a beautiful wisdom to you, Troy, that I think um, is what's really needed right now. And
Mhm,
this, we're talking about Hank Jones and the legacy of him, but also you are the legacy of Hank Jones, and
mhm.
now people will be the legacy of you and what you also bring to with your talents and your gifts and what you do.
As a society, we have to, as a people, not just a society, as a people, right? As humanity, we have to learn how to create spaces to listen. Many of us are accustomed to creating spaces to speak, to
Mm.
say what we feel we need to say, right? And that's fine, but we also need to do the equal amount of work and probably more work in learning how to listen, because people tell you what's going on with them. They just don't always say it directly, but they want to be heard. So the angry young man is acting out and lashing out, and he's engaging in certain activities. The reality is, his, like, deep within the recesses of his heart and his soul, he wants to be heard. Right? The person who's making these bad choice after bad choice that we get frustrated with, especially when they're close to us, right? We're like, they want to be heard. But we live in a world that says, well, your voice doesn't matter because the choice you've made.
Mm.
And when we do that, it actually further pushes them into choices that don't that aren't good for them, right? Because then their value is being equated to their activity and their actions and the things that they do. And so now they're going to keep doing that because they're being told that they have no value because the things that they're doing, and the things that they're doing continues to have people tell them they have no value, and they get caught in this cycle. But if we create spaces where we can listen well and we learn how to listen, right? How to submit ourselves, our opinion, our intellect, our idea, our culture, everything that we hold dear, to submit that to someone else and let them tell us who they are and what's going on with them. Let them do that. Listen and affirm it and honor it, right? Even if they could be wrong or incorrect, but we have to listen first before we can ever speak. We have to be slow to speak and quick to listen. Like, if I don't know how to do it, but if there's a social media platform that was like the opposite of Instagram, the opposite of showing off everything, or we just said, hey, I'm going to take a posture of listening. Whoever wants to be heard, be that anonymously or like you want to show yourself, like, I am here to listen to you, right? We have professionals that do that, to do that well, and I would strongly encourage people to get help because none of us are strong enough to live life alone, right? Get help, but to also just create that rhythm as a people to say, hey, I want to listen to someone. I want to hear their story. I want to know what's going on with them, because maybe, just maybe, there's something that I've learned that I can impart. But truthfully, there's something that they've learned that I can grow from.
So, with what you're saying,
Hmm.
it is so powerful, and it also speaks to a lot of there's a positive side to social media, what you just said, right?
Hmm.
But there's the negative side, what you just said. I'm going to display my best self. I'm going to display to the world
Right.
who I am. And yet mental health, addiction, suicides,
Hmm.
you can blame it on the pandemic, but it's more systemic than that. It was going on
Yeah.
way before the pandemic, just the pandemic, it made it implode enough to where it's
It just
now,
amplified it.
it
Yep.
amplified it, right? And so what you're saying is so powerful. So how, as a society, as a people, as a one society, not just,
Hmm.
I'm black, you're white,
Right.
Okay, it's all of us, because this what we're talking about here, it affects everybody.
Hmm.
And it has become a place where we aren't listening to each other.
Right.
You have to do is turn on the news.
Yes.
You go on Instagram and you can
Hmm.
see all the chatter, right?
Hmm.
So how can we shift this to start healing? Because these are complex things we're talking about. It's not
Right. Right.
one thing and life becomes grand.
No, no, it's not like take two of these in the morning with a meal and you're good. That's
No
not the
fixes here. There's
case.
no quick fixes, what you're saying.
I mean, honestly, I think things behind the icon, having the authentic and real conversation, really like highlighting like these stories of these people who are iconic, right? Like like a person becomes an image, which is so weird, but but to peel that back and actually look at the person that's behind the icon, right? Marilyn for who she is, I think doing that and celebrating that more, valuing like ethics of transparency and vulnerability. It's not like we can take two and solve, take two in the morning with a meal and solve all our problems. We have to do real work, right? Like we have to do real work, and we have to kind of shift the 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 things that we value, right? We have to value things like transparency and authenticity. This is why I love like Behind the Icon. This podcast itself is actually going behind the icon, right? People can become iconic in that they are really effectively reduced to an image or a caricature of themselves, right? And that's what people look at. That's what people want to be, right? I've seen how many countless images I've seen of people mimicking Marilyn in the dress over the, like pushing it down, or, with the blonde hair and all of those things, which is fine. But to look behind that at the person who endured hardships, the person who advocated for others, the person who spoke up, the person who lived a very complicated life and dealt with mental health struggles and got help, right? To value those things, the ugly things, the things that we don't want anybody to know about, right? The things that make us cry ugly tears, to say, hey, let's start to be real with one another, to value that. I think is how we begin to shift as a society. It's a very slow shift. Unfortunately, the tide is slow to turn. However, little by little, we make great progress, right? How do you eat an elephant? Piece by piece, right? I mean, I wish I could get up, give a speech, and everybody would say, "Wow, my life has changed forever by it." I get up and speak every week, and it almost feels like the things that I say fall on deaf ears, but the real work is done in close relationships with one another, and people in positions of influence to make choices based on different values. Say, hey, I'm going to choose to make this film, or choose to highlight this person, or choose to give this opportunity, because it may not be monetarily fruitful, but the abundance that it will produce is sustainable and it's necessary for us as a people, right? So say, hey, I may not make a lot of money, but I'll make a lot of a difference. And I think that is a hard conversation and a hard thing to do.
It is, but it's also where you're going to probably feel more fortified, because there's a lot of wealthy, famous people.
Mm-hmm.
There's some that are very happy. So I'm making a generalization.
Right.
Money and power and fame isn't necessarily going to make you happy. What's going to make you happy is those connections, is
Mm-hmm.
that value, is that listening, taking that time.
Yeah.
And, one of the things that I found really interesting too in doing this episode is Erin Gavin, who plays Marilyn, and Monique DeBose, who plays Ella Fitzgerald, and you
Mm-hmm.
play Hank Jones. There's an interesting thing happening, because each of you have an interesting depth in your own calling and mission. I'm not even going to say civil rights. I'm going to say human rights.
Mm-hmm.
You have a humanity aspect to you, a contribution. It's not just, oh, I'm an actor and I'm trying to get out there and be on 300 million Instagram fans. There's something that's happening in this episode that we do that kind of conjoins. All of you guys are joining together, coming together at this JFK event
Mm-hmm.
that always gets JFK and Marilyn Monroe together, and her singing "Happy Birthday, Mr. President," which is always getting the news.
Right.
But here behind the scenes is also what JFK and Bobby Kennedy were about, which were civil rights at that
Yep.
time. So Marilyn and Hank Jones and Ella Fitzgerald are all having a calling that and wanting to get Bobby Kennedy's ear, also
Yeah.
wanting to be able to move civil rights and human rights forward.
Hmm.
Now I look at you guys as actors and actresses, and you're doing the same thing in the world today, bringing their legacy forward, but also igniting your own. And I find that so fascinating, don't you? I mean, I just think that is just, it's so, and when we hired you, I had no idea your depth and wisdom about and explain to people you are an actor. Look, I mean, your voice is just, I mean, I could listen to you all day long, but you're an actor, but you're also, you do help people. So tell us how you do
Yeah.
help people.
Yeah, I'm privileged to be an actor, a songwriter, a musician, a rapper, but I'm also a pastor of a local church in Lakewood. Not very big, you know, we do well. I'm on the pastoral team, and for just for a long time in my life, I've felt that being able to speak life and to help others and to take the painful things of my life and my story and my past. Um, to do the work of making peace and bringing reconciliation and redemption, and also then helping people to kind of walk in that way as well. um I mean, my history with the church has been hard and painful. There's been a lot of abuses in my family, a lot of hard things. My history with my family has been hard and painful. I lost my mother when I was very young. My
Mm.
father was incarcerated. He's been in and out of prison my entire life. But at this point now, as we're talking, I have a relationship with my father that I wouldn't trade for anything. In this last year, we've spoken more in this last year than we had in my previous 33 years combined.
Wow.
um, being able to get together with him to hear his life story and to see him taking steps to move forward as a person and continue to extend grace, even though there were some times where we didn't talk and there were some times where I was hurt and there was a lot of pain there. I remember when my son was born, I cried because at the thought that how could anybody walk away from this? But then that also helped me to understand, again, something had to happen to cause somebody to walk away from this. Right. And so it gave me a newfound grace and compassion for him. And if my story can help just one person say, man, it's possible, right? Something different is possible. Like freedom is possible, redemption is possible, reconciliation is possible. Then I will work for the rest of my life for that one. The hope is that there would be more, but I would give everything I can to help even just one person live better, step into something different, like live free, have lasting joy, have lasting hope, have lasting peace. It's not seasonal or occasional, right? But it's like tangible, it is palpable. I was so encouraged to sit in that room, right, as we were recording with Aaron and Monique, and just like to walk amongst people whose heart is like just there, right? It wasn't like people just reading lines. It's like people bringing passion, like and real like really doing this for the like good reasons, right? For like to help others, to like point to something better. Like I felt like honored just to be there. Like, man, like this is great. It was a learning experience for me. It was something that I cherish. It's something that I value. Just to being able to have those conversations, to listen to what's scripted, that their scripted conversation, but the subtext, right? And everything that they brought to it, like their real life, their heart, man, like I wouldn't change that for the world. Like it was such a blessing and an honor to be there. And again, if I can do that for somebody, man, by all means, like that's my hope, is that my life would impact and touch somebody. I don't need the fanfare. I don't need the followers. I don't need, the recognition. But if by some means, even what we're talking about today can be a help to somebody, man, I'm grateful for that opportunity.
Well, Troy, I want to say this is that you started out saying that it was an honor to play Hank Jones.
Mhm.
And I have a feeling wherever Hank Jones is, he probably is saying about right now, wow, I feel honored to have this man, this human being that cares so deeply about mankind that you are willing to play him. And so it again is this full circle. And I just want to say thank you for being part of the cast. Thank you for your contribution. And I have a feeling this can touch a lot of people because this world needs healing and it needs compassion and it needs people to have the opportunity to listen. And that was a beautiful gift that you can give all of us. So thank you so much for being with us and sharing your gifts today.
Well, thank you very much. Again, it's an honor and a privilege. I look forward to listening to the episode, sending it out to family and friends. I'm excited about this. Can't wait for February.
All right. Well, we'll see you soon, and we'll be hearing the episode soon enough. And Hank Jones, Troy, you play a fabulous Hank Jones. You did him
Thank you.
well. Okay, you did him good. All right. So you take good care, and thanks for being with us today.
Thank you. Have a nice one.